Okay, quick video note to give you your marching orders for next week. And also there's a couple of specific things I would like to go through from a couple of examples from first drafts that I looked at today. Just looking at the schedule quickly, we are here today, Tuesday 11/10. Your TV structure assignment is due today. The next week is going to be spent rewriting. And the goal is to take what you turned in as your first draft, review the very detailed notes that I provided for you, and to turn it into a second draft that is going to be peer reviewed by your classmates. Over the course of this week, and then you will get those notes back and you will have the opportunity to turn it into a third draft, which you're turning into me. I will probably not be reviewing your second draft unless any of you have any very specific questions that you want to ask me. If you haven't turned in a first draft, I will be definitely taking time to look at a draft when you turn it in, so you get at least one round of feedback before my final notes. So make sure you reach out and you're in touch with me about what you need and questions that you have. But I put a lot of time and a lot of words into giving you feedback on your first drafts. So please go through it carefully, reach out if you have any questions, and yeah, please take the time to understand and enact everything. Those of you who are coming into class, my blue team and my red team, we will go through your first drafts as a group in class, so you will get verbal feedback and obviously any written feedback after that if you need it. But without further ado, the topic for the week is rewriting, and one of the best lessons is from Abraham Lincoln, and this quote is amazing. "I'm sorry I could not have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." Not too long after President Abraham Lincoln delivered the iconic wartime Gettysburg Address of 1863 in under 3 minutes and in just 10 sentences, 272 words. He had written and rewritten and agonized over those words, right? And he wrote a long letter in minuscule handwriting to a friend, the apology above. "I'm sorry I could not have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time." He didn't have the time to contemplate, he didn't have the time to correct or to edit his letter. It's an incredibly lucid lesson in good writing. Right? Keep it short, informative, concise, literary, where every single word counts. But remember, it's not how short you make it, it's how you make it short. Right? Think long, write short. So here are 2 examples that feed into that from first drafts. And I don't mean to call people out there, just thought they were. Everyone had mistakes in their drafts without fail, and which is fine. It's a first draft. It's what it is for. I just thought these 2 were great examples that would be useful for everyone during their rewriting. So here is the first one. Nate comes outside and gets into the passenger side of her car, and they drive to the mall. So there's 2 things going on here that you should pay attention to in terms of concision. Nate comes outside and gets into the passenger side of her car. Gets into the car. One sentence, we can scan it. It's so much better than just spilling onto 2. And there's another element of time. They drive to the mall. So this is novelistic, right? Novelistic writing is one of the sins of screenwriting. If you say they drive to the mall, that means we're sitting with them in the car the entire journey of the car ride. And screen time doesn't work like that, right? Every line on the page is like a moment in the film. It's like a few seconds. It's not a few minutes, it's not a few hours, it's a few seconds. So it's really important to think that way and to write that way. Here's another example. So April pulls out her phone out, and Professor Wilkes' voice fades into background noise. April is scrolling on Twitter and laughing. We hear April's name muffled in the background 3 times. That's okay, it sets the mood. I think that's really lucid. Everything is in the present tense. It's nice. Professor Wilkes, this was my typo, I beg your pardon. April, yes, Professor Wilkes. Professor Wilkes says, if a botanist discovers a new plant in the jungle, which characteristics of the plant would be useful in determining its identity with a dichotomous key? April, the color. Professor Wilkes, not quite. April puts her head down in embarrassment and scrolls on her phone for the remainder of the class. Class is dismissed and everyone, including April, heads towards the door. Professor Wilkes says, April. April says, yes. You know, if you weren't on that phone so much, you'd be performing better in my class. Look, I know most of these other professors don't care about their students, but I do. April nods and exits the classroom. Okay, so there's 2 big mechanics issues going on here, but that are quite easy to fix. And I'm pointing this out again because you all need to go through your screenplays and fix these things, right? The goal is to go through every single sentence and go from a sentence that is 1.5 lines to a sentence that is 1 line, where possible, right? It needs to still be grammatically correct. But let's come back over here. So April puts her head down in embarrassment and scrolls on her phone. That's a lovely image. But for the remainder of the class, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, that's not screen time, that's not moment by moment, right? So as a screenwriter, if you need to get from the beginning, from this moment to the end of the class, you need to find a way to show the viewer that time has passed, because you can't just say for the remainder of the class. That's too long. But also, let's look at the purpose of what's going on over here, right? Class is dismissed. Professor Wilkes, you know, if you weren't on that phone so much, you'd be performing better in my class. If we jump back up to the previous interaction, Professor Wilkes, she's on her phone. Professor Wilkes asks a question. She clearly fails at the question and gets embarrassed. That makes all of this repetitive, right? There's nothing in the second section that we don't learn from this first version. And this first version is showing, right? It shows us that she's distracted by her phone and doing badly in the class. Versus over here, it's relying on Professor Wilkes to speak the information directly. But we don't need this. The only thing we're getting from this is that Professor Wilkes says that he cares about his students. There's other ways to show that in their interactions. When he says not quite, yeah, that response can be tweaked to demonstrate care. But again, so here we go from a scene that is a section that is 1 page, and we're cutting 40% of it. If we get rid of that, and we don't lose anything. In fact, we actually gain. We gain the space to add other things. We also gain the trust of the viewer because you're not repeating information for them. You're just letting them understand things because these actions are very, very well discovered. So trust your viewer and trust yourself. I'm going to post another list of things to keep in mind as you're going through, so you're not just rewriting story, you're also working on mechanics, right? Everything has to be in the present tense. You can only write things that you can see. Your scenes should start late, your scenes should end early, because you only want to focus on the magic, on the important parts, right? Drama is life with the boring bits cut out. So make sure to take the time to cut out all the boring bits and focus only on those things that are contributing to your story.